sitting around the table, I was eating some snacks, I was eating some pretzels, and I dropped a pretzel on my wife's floor and destroyed our home. So she disciplined me with her eyes. And I felt the need to show my friends who were there that I was not afraid of this woman. So I looked my wife in her disciplined eyes. And I reached out and dropped a whole handful of pretzels on the floor. That was the wrong thing to do, church. Wrong thing to do. At the time, I thought it was hilarious, and so did my friends, but they were afraid to laugh. They were waiting to see what my wife would do. She didn't see the humor in it, so they left. They're no longer my friends. You laugh, but if you've been in a relationship, anyone in this room for more than a day, you have a story where some insignificant thing turned into a giant fight. Say amen, church. Amen. That night, it could have been anything that started the fight. It happened to have been a pretzel. But it quickly grew, see, it had nothing to do with that. Megan and I had been married about 6 years at the time. We had a lot of problems in our marriage, things I won't get into with you tonight. I'll just let you know that we did not have a strong marriage and we were fighting for the wrong things. And so that night, we began to fight over 6 years of wrongs. She began to list wrongs that I had done in the 6 years that we've been together. And I began to list the wrongs that she had done. And before long, we were standing in each other's faces, screaming. We were naming all the things that had happened. We were reliving the pain and the frustration and the anger of 6 years. And we were convinced that we were broken, that we were done. She screamed at me that it was over. I screamed at her. I cussed my wife and told her I was leaving her, that it was over. We didn't leave. We said we were going to, but we decided to try and make it work. We worded it this way. We said if we were going to stay together, we were going to have to learn to fight for our marriage as hard as we had fought against it. And that's not been an easy thing. Anybody in this room who's in that fight, in that battle, you know it's not an easy thing. But I'm telling you that it's been 9 years since the pretzel fell. And we're still fighting. Only now we're fighting for our marriage instead of against it. And God is bringing us victories. I brought a picture of my family to show you. That's my hot wife, Megan. That's my little boy, Montgomery. That's my daughter, Ada Beth. Here's a picture of my son being trained up in the way he should go. Milwaukee, I would not have this picture to show you. My son Montgomery was born 3 years after the pretzel fell. Ada Beth came along 3 years after that. So that means as I stand here and I tell you this story with great fear in my heart because I was raised in church, my dad is a pastor, I have a healthy fear of Christians. To be this honest in front of you is not easy. Amen? Yeah, you know how you are. I'm one of you. And I show this picture every night. I've told this story 1,000 times. And every night I stand in front of thousands of people and I tell it and I look at this picture and I realize again that I would not have my family. Montgomery never would have been born. Ada Beth would not exist. My wife and I would not be together and fighting for things that matter if we had stood in our house that night and said it's not worth it. I mean, how quickly it could have went a different way. But because we decided to fight for our marriage, we now have this. We now have something that I don't even have words. I'm a words guy. And I'm standing here in front of you going, I don't know how to communicate to you how I feel. I say it every night, and it never gets easier. My heart pounds in my chest as I say out loud, I now believe that there are some things in life worth fighting for. And you can't convince me otherwise. I know it's easy to fight for the wrong things. I've been there. I still go there. It's easy to fight for the wrong things. It's easy to fight for jobs and careers and promotion and popularity and fame and things that make us feel good. It's easy to fight for bigger houses money in the bank. It's easy to fight for junk. It's hard to fight for things that matter. It's hard to fight for the kingdom of God. There's people around you in need. It's hard to give of yourself for that. It's hard to fight for your family. It's hard to do things. Your kids exhaust you. You got scars and bruises because you're fighting for them. You're fighting for your marriage. Well done. That's worth it. That's so much better than all the junk that you can spend your life fighting for. That's worth it. But you have to be intentional about that fight. You have to be intentional. My wife and I, we have to talk about it all the time. What is worth fighting for? What are we going to fight for? If we're not careful, we will fight for the wrong things. And one night we were talking about how blessed we are to fight for our kids, and we thought, let's fight for a child that's not ours. Let's fight for a child that has no one else. So we started fighting for a little boy named Kahilu. He lived in Uganda. It was $35 a month to fight for him. And I didn't have $35 a month at the time, so I had to give up some cable. And I would write Kahilu letters, and I'd say, I'm fighting for you, man. I'm giving up House Hunters International and Duck Dynasty on your behalf. A little while later, my wife and I were at a restaurant, and I looked down, and I spent more money on one meal at Applebee's than it takes to fight for Kahilu for a month. And Megan and I looked at each other and thought, let's fight for another child. We can skip Applebee's every now and again. Now, if there's somebody in this room who works at your local Applebee's, I'm sure you're doing wonderful things in your neighborhood. And I'm not trying to take away from that ministry. It's a great ministry. But my wife and I thought you could do without our support, and so we started fighting for this child. We'd write him letters. We said, we're fighting for you. We're giving up Fiesta lime chicken and mozzarella sticks on your behalf. And you're worth it. After a year of fighting for that child, we got a letter back that said, because of our sponsorship, his dad was able to learn a trade, and his family no longer needed our help. 1 year, we skipped going to a restaurant 12 times. It wasn't a sacrifice. My family never went without food. We just didn't go to a restaurant. We didn't sacrifice, we reprioritized. And God used it, and He multiplied it to save the life of a child and his family, and He allowed us to be there to see it, so we would know this was worth fighting for. So we began to fight for more and more kids. After a while, I had pictures all over my refrigerator. I thought, I want to go meet some of these kids, so I got on a plane and I flew over there. They're real! They're real kids! They look different when they're not flat and stuck in your refrigerator. They walked right up to me. They didn't have magnets on their foreheads or nothing. Real. They danced. They were singing songs. I asked what they were saying. I was told these kids had wrote a song for us. They were singing to Jesus, thanking Him for our family. I saw that. I saw flat pictures on my refrigerator walk and talk and sing songs to Jesus for my family, who had only reprioritized. See, my kids had never felt it. But these kids, to them it was everything. I asked if I could see the difference. How far have they come? What did it look like before? And they took me to another community, and there I met children who had no one. They gave me a bucket. I learned they were asking me to help them get water. So I took my bucket, I started following these kids down this mountain, a steep mountain, dusty animal trail on the side of a mountain. It was 100 degrees outside as we walked down this mountain. This man walked by me, said something in his language. When I asked what he said, they told me. He said, white boy is going to fall off the mountain. So I was being cautious. But after a half hour, we got to the bottom. And at the bottom of this mountain, there's a whole mob of people. I'm kind of looking down over top of them, you know. And there's a crowd of them. And they're pushing and shoving. They got buckets and jugs. They're fighting each other for water. So there's a stream of water running from a rock a few feet off the ground, about as much that would come out of your bathtub if you turned it on full blast. And everyone there is trying to get to that water, and they're pushing and shoving. Buckets are being spilled. Jugs are being knocked out of people's hands. They're fighting to get to that water. And I'm standing above them looking down going, this is chaos. This is barbaric. Stop fighting. Form a line. Am I the greatest missionary that's ever lived? I'm seeing solutions, people. And as I'm thinking this, as I'm looking down going, why are you fighting? Oh my gosh, this is crazy. I reached in my book bag and I grabbed a bottle of water. Well, I was thirsty. It was 100 degrees outside. I just walked a half hour on a dusty animal trail in that heat. I needed something to drink. And I'm looking down at these folks going, why are you fighting? You uncivilized people. And then it hits me. In my entire life, I've never worried about where I'm getting my next drink of water. It's never crossed my mind. My wife, Megan, that I showed you a picture of, my son, Montgomery, my daughter, my princess, Ada, if they needed water, life today, and the only way I could get it was to walk a half hour down a dusty animal trail in 100-degree heat and fight you for it, I'd fight every one of you. I'd push the oldest lady in here down. Coming for you, Grandma. I would fight you for my family. And if you have any ounce of pride in you or honor whatsoever, and the only way you could get water, life for the people that you love was to fight me for it, every one of you would fight me. Say amen. Amen. You would lose because I am ripped. Say amen. No one ever says amen to that. It came time to leave, they told me, Warren, get your bucket, you gotta fill it up with water, man. We gotta go. We gotta go to another community. So I got my bucket, I'm behind this crowd of people. I've got to fight them. And it's intimidating. So I'm picking out the weakest people in the bunch, who I'm going to knock down first, to get to the front of this crowd. And just before I push through, I look down, there's a boy standing beside me. He's got a jug at his feet, and I watch him for a little while. I had my camera at my side. I took his picture. I brought his picture. You can see, it's literally just, I'm standing here, he's standing there, and in front of us is this crowd of people in the stream, and I hit snap a couple of times. And then I looked at the volunteer who was on this side of me, and I said, hey, I'm not sure how I'm going to fight this crowd. How will this little boy fight this crowd to get water? And the volunteer said, Warren, he has been here for hours. He could be here all day. He has to wait until someone here will fight for him. And I watched as people passed him. He had no one there to fight for him. And I did what I believe everyone in Milwaukee probably would have done if you were there on the side of that mountain that day. I walked over and took that boy's jug. He looked at me like that. His expression did not change. He thought I was the craziest thing he'd ever seen. But I took that jug and I began to push my way to the front of that crowd. I shoved my way to the front of that crowd. I filled my bucket up with water. I filled his jug up with water. I turned around. I fought back to him. I gave him his jug. And together, me and that little boy turned and walked up a mountain in 100-degree heat on a slippery, dusty animal trail, pulling a 5-gallon bucket full of water behind me. Go home and fill up a 5-gallon bucket full of water and drag it around. It's heavy. I don't care if you are as ripped as I am. That's sarcasm. It's heavy. Plus, I was being cautious because I didn't want to fall as the prophet had foretold. He could have been a man of God. I don't know, I'm being careful. It took me an hour. It took me an hour to get back up that mountain with that bucket. I get to the top and I sit down under this tree. I'm wiping the sweat off my face. This little boy who's walking with me, he turns and he looks at me. And then he turns and starts walking away. So I say to the volunteer, we've made it, right? We're done. I mean, my arms are aching, my legs are aching, I'm exhausted. I just lugged this bucket up this mountain for an hour. I mean, please tell me we're done. And she said, you are. But he's not. So he lives in a different community than the one you're working in, Warren. He has at least another hour or so to walk. 2 days later, I flew home. I told my wife, Megan, this story. And together we walked around my house. And we thanked God for water. I had never done that. But I laid hands on the faucets.